What's happening? What's happening? What's happening?
And we're back!
That's right, back again, episode 10, JC's Pop Culture Podcast here. Gonna dive into some spoiler movie reviews. Got a handful of things that I've watched recently I want to get into reviews for, some of which I've been wanting to watch for a while now. Finally got around to it. Super excited about them. All of these reviews here at the beginning are going to be spoiler filled. So, if you don't want to be spoiled on it, if you only want to listen to one review, I'll try and put timestamps in the video description and in the show notes there if you're listening on the audio side to the audio only version of the podcast. So, go to the one you want to listen to, and then you can move on to the latter portion where we'll talk some movie news and stuff. But let's get into it. Let's lead it off with Longlegs. Been wanting to see this one for a while. Let's get into talking a little bit about Longlegs and a spoiler review for this. All right, so Longlegs, obviously written and directed by Osgood Perkins, the son of Anthony Perkins, who played Norman Bates in one of the greatest horror movies ever, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, way back in 1960. His son, Osgood Perkins, has done some good stuff in the horror genre. Longlegs here, really my first introduction to him, I do believe. I don't think I've seen any of his other work, but I kind of want to go back and watch it now because I did enjoy this. You get Blair Underwood, you get Micah Monroe as the detectives, you get Nicolas Cage here in a awesome performance where he's unrecognizable with the prosthetics and shit that they used. Received a ton of hype, and that's really the only negative thing that I want to talk about with this movie for the most part is just the damn overhype the critics did. This is the scariest movie. People are passing out in the fucking theater. All that crazy shit they were saying about this movie. And I think that hurt it a little bit because then people are going in with these expectations that they're going to have their pants scared off of them. And, then they come out and they're feeling disappointed because, it wasn't that scary, despite the fact that it's still a really good movie. Is it the scariest movie in the decade or whatever the hell they were saying? No, it's not. But is it a damn good movie? Absolutely, it really is. So just talk a little bit about it. As far as performances go, I thought Micah Monroe was actually really good in the movie. I've heard some mixed things. Some people said, they thought her performance was maybe like a little wooden or something like that. But I think really when you find out what the character has gone through and kind of the trauma of her past and shit, I think she played it really well up until, that third act where things change as you really start to see her kind of play it differently, and I thought she did a really good job of that. Most underrated actor in this film to me was Blair Underwood. Loved his performance that he gave in this. Hate, what happened to him at the end of the film, obviously meeting his demise. But I think that it really comes down to how do you feel about the third act? Because for me, that's when the movie really exploded, and I was like, oh, this shit is awesome. I love the third act of this movie. Other people had problems with the third act because, it comes down to it. What is revealed finally, ultimately, like I said, spoilers are bound for all these movies, guys. I'm going to get into it. So what's revealed pretty much is obviously Nick Cage's character, Longlegs, what was his name? Cobble, something like that. Pretty much is, working with the devil type shit, satanic type shit or whatever. And he's got these dolls that he puts, and he has an accomplice that delivers the dolls. And those really lead to, the patriarch of the family, going on and murdering the whole family. And he's going on this crusade, I guess you can call it. And, they're trying to figure out the whole movie. Well, he's not doing the killings. Who's his accomplice? And then, of course, you come to find out the twist is that it's Micah Monroe's mother is the accomplice. She was a nun at the church, so people let her in. She tells them they want a gift from the church, and it all revolves around the birthday of, a young girl in that family, delivering that doll for their birthday. But that doll has some, supernatural shit to it. And I liked that angle of it where it gets a little bit supernatural and shit with it. But really, ultimately, I guess the reveal of the third act depends on how you feel about it. Because I didn't see the mother thing coming, honestly. I guess I probably should have. But when I was watching, I was kind of thinking, wait a minute, is Micah Monroe's character, Agent Lee Harker, is that the accomplice? I was kind of thinking that because you don't really learn too much about her backstory. It's kind of dealt out to you periodically throughout the film, and I like the way that they played that, so it's almost a mystery, but something's going on with her, and so you're wondering, is she the accomplice? But then you come to find out, no. Actually, Longlegs visited her, and, to keep from her being a victim, the family being a victim, the mom essentially makes a deal with the devil and stuff and agrees to be the accomplice and help throughout all these years. You're talking across like 3 decades, I think. It goes 70s, 80s, and this movie takes place in the 90s. It never specifically says that, but you see the picture of Bill Clinton on the wall. You see all the 90s shit. There's no cell phones involved in the movie, all of that, so you can kind of just take that in and take it in for yourself. And that's one thing I like about this movie is it doesn't really spoon feed you everything. You kind of got to pay attention and pick up on little things yourself, and I absolutely love that. The film is shot beautifully. Learn a lot of things through, the cinematic language, the shots they're trying to tell you is how you learn a lot of things that are going on. and really get to experience things. It is a slow burn. It's a slow build. So I know in today's day and age, a lot of people don't like that. They're like, oh man, this thing's too fucking slow. And maybe, in the first act, I felt that a little bit, but by the time you get too close to the midpoint of this movie, this shit really starts to pick up, especially when you start getting more and more of Nick Cage's Longlegs character. That's what really took it over the top for me, of course, was his awesome performance. Should get a nod at the Oscars, won't, much like Toni Collette back in 2018 should have got an Oscar for Hereditary. Nick Cage should get some, mentions for this shit, but he won't because we know how the Academy hates and looks down on horror, unfortunately. But this was a great performance by him. Great job writing and directing the way that he crafted the story for Osgood Perkins, in my opinion. So, and then in that third act, another thing that people had problems with was that, she finds everything out. Agent Lee Harker reveals everything. She realizes her mom's the accomplice. It's all revealed through kind of a voiceover from her mom, I guess you can say, after, she's knocked out. Once her mom, shoots her doll in the head, it does something to her. She's knocked out. She wakes up, in the room where Nicolas Cage's character, Longlegs, has been building these dolls throughout the movie. And she finds out, tries to go and tell the other detective played by Blair Underwood, Agent Carter, of course, about all of this. And by the time she's done that, her mom's already in the house. They already have the doll in the house because, of course, it's his daughter's birthday. And earlier in the film, she had asked, Agent Lee Harker to come to her birthday party, so we knew this was going to happen. And then by this point, when she's in the house, she knows what's going on. So the thing that people had problems with, I think, is the fact that she doesn't really stop everything until it's too late. And I think more or less the way I took it was, she's just kind of frozen in that moment, almost like, is this shit really happening? And then also, earlier it showed when they pulled the little ball out of one of the doll's heads, it was kind of affecting Agent Lee Harker then. So I'm kind of wondering if at that point that doll that's still in the room was affecting her and not allowing her to, act on the thing she was trying to do there to try and stop this from happening. But I think that's the thing a lot of people had problems with was, one, the reveal of the mother. I had no problems with that. And two, the fact that Agent Lee Harker here at the end didn't necessarily stop everything from happening in the way that she could have. But I thought that it was a good ending just because she does save the little girl. She gets her out. She unfortunately, has to have more trauma. She has to kill, the other agent, Agent Carter there, played by Blair Underwood, has to kill him after he's already killed his wife and is coming, then going to try and kill his daughter. She has to kill him. And then, of course, ultimately, the big thing she has to do that was really hard, I'm sure, was to kill her own mother at the end of this movie. So just, super dark movie. A lot of fucked up shit goes on, but man, it's well crafted. And at the end of it, it's one of those movies that you're sitting there and you're feeling weird about it, the whole time. It's almost like an uncomfortableness, especially in the Nick Cage scenes. I laughed a few times in the performance, but it's not like a hilarious laughter. It's a laughter because you're just so uncomfortable and awkward feeling with it. And that's what this movie does a great job of creating throughout its slow build and stuff. It's just this uncomfortable feeling, this tension that you feel growing and growing. And then ultimately at the end, this sense of dread because did she stop it? Is it going to continue? You don't really know. And I love that it's not necessarily a definitive answer. Of course, super dark themes, super dark movie, but man, it's well done. For sure, my favorite horror movie of the year so far, and one of my favorite movies of the year in general. So I didn't have problems with the third act like a lot of people did. The third act to me was phenomenal. I fucking love the way the pace picked up in the third act, the way stuff started being revealed, the way that she ends up having to kind of be a hero but endure more trauma in doing so. I really kind of hope they don't make a sequel to this movie. I don't think that Osgood Perkins is someone that would make a sequel, but it also performed really well. So we'll see what happens there. I think it's the highest grossing movie for Neon, the studio that put this out. But all in all, really good movie for me. For my rating on it, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. I think, as much as I love a slow build, it was a little bit too slow for my liking in the beginning. So that took off, a half point. And then the other half point that comes off keeping this thing from being a perfect 10 and being at the score of 9 out of 10 is I could have just used more of Nick Cage's character. He obviously goes out early. The way he goes out, though, got to talk about that real quick. That's awesome. He's in the interrogation. He starts banging his head on the table and ultimately, commits suicide that way. And then the shots of, the little bit of gore that you get once he does that. And he's got, kind of like his tooth hanging out and all that shit. Well done gore in the times that they did show gore in this movie. So that was pretty awesome. And despite the fact that his death scene was really great and, super creepy, I just, his character really made the film and his performance really made the film. So would have loved to see more of him and if, kind of have maybe a showdown at the end between him and Agent Lee Harker. That's the only other downside for me. So awesome movie for me. One of the best of the year for me so far. 9 out of 10 on Longlegs. Now let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about Civil War, a movie that came out earlier in the year that I finally got a chance to see. All right, so Civil War, I think came out, I want to say back in April maybe. Wanted to see it, never got a chance to get around to seeing it until now. Written and directed by Alex Garland, who has done some good stuff in the past. I really loved Annihilation that he wrote and directed. He also wrote the Judge Dredd remake that I think is super underrated. But now he comes back with Civil War, which kind of goes, in line with some other movies like apocalyptic shit, if I could say that right, or post-apocalyptic, whatever you want to call it, kind of end of the world type movies that have been coming out the past, 2-3 years. You had Don't Look Up a few years ago. You had Leave the World Behind with Julia Roberts last year, and then Civil War this year, kind of a horrific take on, I guess, an alternative future where the president's, disbanded the FBI. He's taken out citizens with, airstrikes, all kinds of crazy shit. And the world's pretty much in chaos right now. You get the, I can't remember what the hell were they called? The California and Texas teaming up, and was it World Forces, something like that. Can't remember exactly what they were called there. But, that's kind of the big villain of the movie, and they're trying to kill the president or whatever, essentially. That's kind of what we're leading up to in the third act. But we're following, the photographers of this, which I thought was an interesting angle. Didn't realize that was the angle until I started the movie. And it was another one that I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to like this. But by the time they get going, get on their little road trip, and you start to see this dystopian, alternative future, alternative United States and shit, it's pretty awesome getting to see all that stuff. And I'm from West Virginia, and getting to see West Virginia, play a part in the movie was pretty cool, especially the fact that it's like a safe haven for people during all this crazy shit going on. But Kirsten Dunst stars as, kind of the main photographer, and you get Kaylee Spaney as Jesse, who is, somebody that wants to be a photographer. And really the centerpiece of this movie is kind of their relationship. At the beginning of the movie, Kirsten Dunst is just this hardened photographer that's, been photographing wars, photographing all kinds of terrible shit. And she really never shows emotion, and then you kind of have the juxtaposition of that with the Jesse character, which Kaylee Spaney we'll get to see in Alien Romulus coming up real soon. Real excited about that one. She's starring in that film, but she's kind of the opposite of that character. She really is a big fan of Lee and her work, and she wants to be a photographer like that. But also at the beginning of this movie, she's super emotional, doesn't really realize what she's getting herself into until she gets into it. And then what's really cool, though, is throughout the course of this film, we get to see those characters kind of come, I guess, have an effect on each other and shit. And we see those characters turn, which really culminates in once we get to that third act scene in the White House and stuff, which awesome set recreations in here, awesome set pieces in general of all the places they went. I thought Alex Garland did a really good job with that. Nick Offerman plays the president in this movie. So, you get some other good cameos in there. One of the best scenes is Jesse Plemons, of course, who was married to Kirsten Dunst in real life. That has a really, high tense scene where they've been killing a bunch of people and they're about to kill them as well. Really high intense scene. And that's one good thing I think this movie does. It has good tension throughout. It's more action horror than horror in general, but there is, a good bit of gore in this movie. The set piece, like I said, great, very well shot, very well put together. And I think the story that it crafts throughout, you really start to kind of feel for these characters, Kirsten Dunst's character, because she almost becomes like a motherly figure to Kaylee Spaney's character. And at one point in the movie, which this, of course, comes into play at the end, is, Kaylee Spaney's character asks Lee, the photographer, if I do get shot, will you, photograph that moment? And she says, well, what do you think? Pretty much implying, of course I will. It's my job. And then we get to the climax of the movie. And by this point, we have seen, Jesse, the Kaylee Spaney character, really start to get acclimated to this lifestyle, start to love this lifestyle. And to the point where, they're following these people trying to infiltrate the White House right here in the, the third act, the climax of this film. And we see Kirsten Dunst's character like having panic attacks, not being able to really move and take pictures and stuff. Whereas Jessie, the Kaylee Spaney character, is kind of taking on her role now. She's hardened to it. She's just loving being in this action. She's almost getting ran over by cars and getting in the way of the army forces and shit that are trying to infiltrate the White House, much like we saw Kirsten Dunst's character do. So you start to get a sense of, oh, wait a minute, these characters have flipped here towards the third act. So much so to the point of, kind of the climax of the movie is Kaylee Spaney's character jumps out in front, is taking pictures, and she's about to get shot. And, and Kirsten Dunst, which earlier in the film, the character that we knew probably would have not done anything just stand there and take a picture, she pushes her out of the way, and she's the one that gets shot and killed. And then, of course, Kaylee Spaney's character of Jessie takes pictures of her being shot. So it's really, the complete opposite. And then, of course, at the end, they do end up killing the president, which, of course, another movie that's pretty dark here at the end. But the climax for the character that we're following is, of course, the character of Jessie that's gotten into this gets the money shot of that and of the president, being dead. So obviously she's going to become the famous photographer now that Kirsten Dunst's character was throughout this movie. So all in all, despite, being a little apprehensive about it when the movie started out about how I'd feel about it, by the time this thing wrapped up, I really enjoyed this movie. It's in my top 10 currently, which, hey, stay tuned for my ranking of my top 10 films of the year. That'll be coming, probably in early January as we're continuing to build this list. Right now, Civil War's sitting in there. We'll see if it stays by the time it comes around, but really did enjoy this movie. I think a lot of times I've really enjoyed these movies. I mentioned Don't Look Up, Leave the World Behind. I think I've enjoyed, all of those a lot. Civil War's right up there with those. I'd probably put it behind Don't Look Up, but probably in front of Leave the World Behind personally. I really liked Civil War and the world that Alex Garland kind of created in here. And it's a world that I hope we never reach in real life for sure. But nonetheless, really good movie experience to watch at least once if you haven't seen it yet. Highly recommend it. I think it's coming to Max in September, actually. So is I Saw the TV Glow, another one that I want to see in the future. But Civil War for me, good film. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10 as far as my rating for Civil War. Now let's talk about some action movies. Let's get into some action talk here. Let's lead it off with Hitman, which came out on Netflix as Richard Linklater coming back into the fold. All right, so Hitman, like I said, Richard Linklater coming back around. One of my favorites, obviously, from Dazed and Confused, and then, kind of the sequel to that, Everybody Wants Some, or not necessarily a sequel. It's just kind of a sequel in spirit, I guess you could call it, because it's a follow-up. Dazed and Confused was in the 70s. Everybody Wants Some is in the 80s or 90s, one of the two. But definitely they kind of have a similar feel. You also got Slacker, one of his very first movies that inspired one of my favorite writer-directors of all time, Kevin Smith. So big fan of Richard Linklater and the things that he does. He comes back here with Hitman on Netflix, and he teams up with Glenn Powell, who not only stars in the movie and does a hell of a job with his performance playing, a character that becomes a hitman out of nowhere, or a fake hitman, I guess I should say, out of nowhere, because he's working with the police as a consultant. He's actually a college professor or high school professor. College, I think it's college professor. It's his full-time job, but he kind of moonlights as an consultant for the police, and they end up having to fire one of the guys that pretends to be the fake hitman. And so he has to do this and start being the fake hitman and try and get people to get arrested for trying to put hits out on people. So he does a great job, because once he gets into this role, he starts wearing different disguises to, kind of tailor to whatever person that he's working with is trying to put out the hit. And he plays all these different characters and does a hell of a job, man. But of course, what you end up getting is actually a bit of almost like a rom-com with this. I wasn't expecting it to take this turn, but once it really did, it got into a lot of fun areas. And of course, you get Madison Figueroa Masters as the girl that he is, going after. His character's name is Gary Johnson. She's played by Adria Arjona. And she does a great job in the movie as well. She's super attractive lady, I'll tell you that much. But Glenn Powell plays Gary Johnson, which is based on a real character, actually. It's loosely based on a true story. Of course, a lot of the stuff about, the murders and stuff that we get into towards the end of the film were all, added in for obviously interesting purposes here in this film. But I really like the story that it crafts, because you get him, and honestly, you see him at the beginning. He's just this nerdy professor, but he becomes this character, for this hit that she wants to put out on her husband at the time. And he kind of convinced her not to do it because, he kind of likes her. She kind of hit it off there. And so he convinced her not to do it. And then, he goes back to her as this character that he was pretending to be as the fake hitman. And throughout the movie, you kind of see him transition, from more of his regular self that we know to kind of becoming this character that he's created. Until the point to where at the end, he's kind of a blend of both of those characters. But it's really cool because it brings out some different parts of him that he didn't know existed. And then, of course, as it boils down to it, you get a lot of cool action at the end as they're trying to cover things up that they've done. And so you get some really cool, almost like murder mystery aspects to it. That's really, really interesting. And I think it's just a really well-crafted story and really well written by Glenn Powell and Richard Linklater. The dialogue specifically, which you got to expect that in a Linklater film to have really cool and fun dialogue. And definitely you get that in this movie. So I super enjoyed Hitman. I thought that the end of it was really clever because, of course, the two end up together, and they end up, covering up the murder of the other cop that, ended up being fired. So he was the one that could get that job. But really, well-crafted story, well shot, well acted. Can't say enough about Glenn Powell and the things that he's doing, this summer. Hitman, Twisters, you name it. He's really having a run right now. And Hitman may be my favorite performance of his. Twisters is up there as well, but I thought Hitman was really well done. I mentioned Civil War's in that top 10 right now. So is Hitman. I really enjoyed this one as well. You get action to it, you get comedy in it, and you even get a little bit of the rom-com aspect to it once he, meets the character of Madison in this movie, and then they really hit it off. And then, of course, the end of the film in the third act, she gets to learn who he really is, and they still, end up working together and to, cover up the things that she's done after she goes on to murder her husband on her own. But they really set everything up well because it's all presented earlier in the film. He's telling how he does hits, of course, because he's still pretending to be the hitman when he's around her when they first start dating. And she uses that advice to actually kill her husband, and it works. So then he has to help her cover that up. But then one of the cop finds out, and they end up having to murder him and cover that up. And then, of course, it kind of flashes forward for the end, kind of the denouement of the film where it shows them with their kids, and they're talking about how did you and dad meet? And so that's just funny thinking about it once you've gone through the whole movie. And it's just really well, really well done. The dialogue about how's the pie is something that he uses every time right there when he's, wanting people to know that he's the hitman. And then they kind of close the film with that same line of dialogue. So I love the way that everything sets up something else in this movie that's just well done, well written. That's how you get a good script. And so great action, great comedy, good little romance story as well if you're into that, which I'm a sucker for, rom-coms myself. So I really enjoyed Hitman. For me, it comes out at 8 out of 10 here for this one. Now let's talk about another action movie. Let's talk about Bad Boys. Bad Boys, what you gonna do? And of course, we're talking about Bad Boys Ride or Die, which, the fact that this is the fourth one and they called the third one, it still bothers me. The third one's called Bad Boys for Life. If you knew you were going to make a fourth one, which I guess they didn't at that point, you should have had the fourth one be fucking Bad Boys for Life. I mean, it just makes sense. But instead, it's Bad Boys Ride or Die. The two people that directed this is really what stood out for me. Adil and Bilal, I believe is what they're called there. That's what they go by, kind of a directing team. And the standout thing that they brought to this was some really cool shots. You probably saw the video going around when they were making this of Will Smith having this camera on his chest that he's got to like hit to make it turn the other way or it's turning back on him multiple ways. And a lot of the ways that they filmed the action scenes, and this is what really made this film stand out for me, was a lot of the cool shots that were involved in all the action set pieces here in Bad Boys Ride or Die. But obviously Martin Lawrence, Will Smith, your main characters, Marcus and Mike Lowry. And then, of course, you get Vanessa Hudgens back from the last one, Alexander Ludwig back from the last one, playing, their characters from the previous film. Mike Lowry gets married in this movie. Marcus is dealing with a heart attack that he suffers at the beginning of the movie. But, if you like Bad Boys, it's really going to, bring you back to that kind of nostalgia that it was back in the 90s. You get the good comedy involved between Mike Lowry and Marcus. I think that Martin Lawrence really shines in his comedic moments in this, especially after he has his heart attack and he's going through this shit thinking that he can't die. But a lot of that does pay off in the end as well. Like I said, really cool action set pieces, especially in the final act of the film where you get to see this giant ass CGI alligator in this, kind of villain lair and stuff. So, nothing special necessarily about this movie, but it just brings you back that nostalgia of having a Bad Boys movie again. And I think, if there is something different about this one, it's that, Adil and Bilal bring something really cool to the action set pieces with a lot of the camera work that they utilize in those action set pieces. It's really cool. You get a Michael Bay cameo at one point when Martin Lawrence is walking through traffic and Michael Bay almost hits him. So it's a good nod to the, the origin of these films. Still, some of Michael Bay's best films, I think, was the first couple Bad Boys movies. But nonetheless, I think it's well done for a Bad Boys movie. Is it going to be one of my favorite movies of the year? Probably not, but I have a hell of a good time watching it, and would I recommend you watching it if you're a fan of the Bad Boys movie? Also, hell yeah. So I think, good performances from Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, a return to form for them here in Bad Boys. And I like the fact that, you bring back some characters from the previous one. Mike Lowry's son comes back as well, get a pretty good storyline, kind of a redemptive arc for him. And, I was kind of worried, though, in that last one, that they were going to start focusing this more on, Alexander Ludwig's character, Vanessa Hudgens' character, and Martin Lawrence's, I'm not Martin Lawrence's, but Mike Lowry's son, and they would kind of carry the franchise on moving forward. So if you were looking for that, this might disappoint you, but for me, I'm glad to see that's not what they did, and they went back to kind of the original formula of Marcus and Mike working together more so. This time they're trying to avenge the captain who is trying to be set up as a dirty cop, and when he's definitely not a dirty cop, and so of course that all gets resolved at the end. But I like the fact they went back to kind of the original formula, and it's not necessarily passing the torch so much as I was worried they were going to do, because that's what I was worried when I heard they were making another one, was they're going to pass the torch. It's going to be his son and these new characters, and although they play a part, Mike Lowry and Marcus are still the main focus of this movie, which is what I was hoping to see. And one of the funniest things for me is that Reggie comes back. You guys remember Reggie from Bad Boys 2, where they're fucking with him at the door when he's about to take out Marcus's daughter. Of course, they end up married now, but he gets a badass scene in this one where he saves the house and they're watching it on kind of a Ring camera or whatever and shit. That's really cool. And then, of course, the end, kind of the end stinger is him getting to use the grill and Marcus and Mike letting him do it because, it's like he did some badass shit. He saved the family. So that was pretty funny as well. Like I said, that's just one piece of comedy that comes throughout this movie. There's a lot of laughs in it and a lot of cool action set pieces. So I enjoyed Bad Boys Ride or Die well enough to say that it's an above average movie. For me, it gets a 7 out of 10. And the last movie that we're going to talk about here in review is The Fall Guy. All right, so The Fall Guy, directed by David Leitch, written by Glenn Larson and Drew Pearce, Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt, Aaron Taylor Johnson star, and of course you also get Hannah Waddingham from Ted Lasso. Love Ted Lasso. Glad to see her pop up in this and play a role. Winston Duke's in here as well. Pretty good cast all around. As you hear a lot of star power there just in those names alone, and then you get some other guys that pop up throughout the film as well. But The Fall Guy is a really good ode to stuntmen, something that's not recognized enough in Hollywood. They even have a line in this movie talking about, is there an Oscars for stuntmen? And he's like, no, there's not, and there really should be, honestly. Especially after watching this movie, you gain another appreciation for him. And I like the montage at the beginning talking about the stuntmen and showing some stunts and shit. But ultimately, it's Ryan Gosling as the stuntman here. That's why the Fall Guy, he takes the falls and shit like that. That's hence where the name comes from. But at the beginning of the movie, you show him and Emily Blunt's character, who at the time is a DP or some type of production assistant, and they are kind of have this relationship that they've built. And unfortunately, Ryan Gosling's stuntman, as does happen to plenty of stuntmen, and actually, funny enough, I've been listening to Talkville, the Smallville rewatch podcast, and Tom Welling's stunt actor actually had this happen to him, something very similar to what happens to Ryan Gosling's character in this film here, which is he's supposed to be taking a drop, and they have this thing called a what's it called, a descaler, de-escalator, something like that, that is supposed to stop you when you get a foot from the ground or whatever when you're doing one of these fall stunts. And his fails and he suffers a major injury, so he gets out of the profession, and then we see him as a valet and shit at the beginning of the movie. And so that's stuff that actually really does happen, because they talked about it happening to Tom Welling's stuntman. I believe it was a man named Chris, I want to say Chris Sayer, and he suffered, a brutal injury that took him, a long time to recover from. He had to relearn to walk and everything again. So, despite the fact that this movie kind of played differently, this is, something tragic that does happen to, stuntmen in the industry. So good that they point that out as well. But then once we get into kind of the plot of the movie, is you get Hannah Waddingham's character, the producer, calling him back to be a stuntman again, because they need one, for the movie that they're working on. And he's obviously not going to do it. He's reluctant. He was out of the business until he finds out that Emily Blunt's character is directing the film. So boom, he's back in it. And, he's happy that she's achieved her stuff of director. And then at that point, she's kind of mad because he kind of fell off the grid after that, didn't talk to her again. So they have this will they or won't they at that point, obviously. But what gets uncovered, interestingly enough, is that the lead actor is missing, Aaron Taylor Johnson's character. And, Hannah Waddingham says, I called you back here to try and figure this out. So not only is he having to be the stuntman of the movie, but he's trying to uncover this plot of why the lead actor is missing and such throughout this film. So you get a bunch of funny action pieces, a bunch of funny shit going on. I think this movie has really good comedy as well, because it does this thing where Emily Blunt's character and Ryan Gosling's character are talking about the movie that they're making, but the stuff that they're talking about the movie that they're making in this movie is actually applying to us watching this movie. So it's almost like a fourth wall break because they're talking about, well, we could do this in the third act, we could do this, and everything that they're talking about ends up paying off in the actual movie that we're watching, which is just really cool to see. Not only see the behind the scenes stuff that they're showing, as they're making a movie on this movie, but also see kind of like the fourth wall break that's really cool when they're talking about this. Because, at one point they're talking on the phone and they're like, she's like, I'm thinking in the script we could have a scene where the characters are talking, but it's almost like there's a line in between them. They're not able to get to each other. And it's showing this in split screen with literally a line in between Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt's characters as they're talking about this. So it's like everything they're talking about is applying to the script and the movie that they're working on filming, but it's applying to the movie that we're watching as well, which is always really fucking cool to me when films do stuff like that. And that's not easy to write stuff like that as well. So got to give a shout out to Glenn Larson and Drew Pearce for being able to make that work in this movie. And it makes it really fun to watch. It makes it really funny to watch too, all the hijinks that ensue as Ryan Gosling uncovers this plot and Winston Duke helps him at times, especially getting into that third act. And of course, what's revealed at the end is that Hannah Waddingham's behind it all, trying to have this, it's kind of a convoluted little plot or whatever. But of course, the cool part is once they discover it, getting to see him, take out Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, who was kind of a dick to him throughout the whole movie. And of course, he triumphs at the end. He gets the tape as they record, Aaron Taylor Johnson saying everything that they did and everything like that. So that kind of ends up being your third act. And of course, you finally get to see Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling's character end up on a beach, drinking margaritas or whatever it was that they talked about in the opening initial part of this film that we never got to see come to fruition until finally in the denouement we get to see it. And of course, it's funny to see after Aaron Taylor Johnson's taken out when they actually showcase the film that they were making and we're seeing the premiere of it. It's Jason Momoa in a little brief cameo at the end of this one pops up as well. So like I said, a lot of star power in this one. Well directed, really cool. Some of the action shots in this one, the way that they're filmed as well. And I always love Ryan Gosling, and when he gets to play, a comedy role and an action role. I think Drive's one of the most underrated action movies of all time. He gets to do a little bit of both in this. Gets to be an action star, get to, bring out his comedy chops, which I think he does a great job of. And him and Emily Blunt got pretty good chemistry on screen as well, as far as the rom-com aspect. And you get a hell of a lot of laughs throughout from all the different characters. Hannah Waddingham, Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, Winston Duke character, all of them provide good moments of comedy throughout the film. So I really enjoyed The Fall Guy a lot more than I thought I would. So comes out to me at a 7.5 out of 10. That's my rating for The Fall Guy. And that will wrap up our movie review portion of this. All the spoiler reviews here for the handful of movies that we talked about. A couple in the horror genre, a few in the action genre. And looking forward, got Alien Romulus coming out. I'm going to be watching it soon. So on the next episode of JC's Pop Culture Podcast, probably get to hear a review for that. Plus probably some other stuff that I've watched in the meantime as well, which means we're going to wrap this up now with some movie and TV show news and even a little bit of video game news pitched in there as well for the final segments here of JC's Pop Culture Podcast here on episode 10. All right, may as well lead it off with the video game news here. Don't really talk a ton of video game news here, usually, unless it's EA Sports College Football 25, which, of course, if you're a fan of that, check out the YouTube channel. If you're listening to this on the audio-only side, do a lot of streams for that game, a lot of news for that game, my favorite video game to play. But we know that one of my favorite movie franchise, rather, is Halloween, and Halloween is getting a video game from Retro Realms that's also a crossover with Evil Dead. I think you'll be able to play with each other in the worlds of these two games, which is pretty sweet. It is kind of the 16-bit side-scroller style. I was hoping that the Halloween video game would be a little bit more, realistic, maybe campaign-based, or maybe that asymmetrical style of like Friday the 13th and Dead by Daylight. But nonetheless, I'll probably still play this since it's coming out in October, which is pretty cool because they just announced it and they revealed that it's coming out October 18th. So just in time to play them for Halloween. Boss Team Games developing two video games based on the Halloween franchise. One of them powered by Unreal Engine 5 and aided by input from John Carpenter. The other one, though, so maybe we still will get that, campaign one that's, either a campaign-based game or maybe it's an online-style game like Friday the 13th Dead by Daylight that has a campaign, because that's really what I want. I want a story mode where I can go through as Dr. Loomis, Laurie Strode, or a character that Michael Myers is stalking throughout the story mode. I think that would be so badass. But the other ones here, the ones that we're talking about that have been revealed, are the retro-style 16-bit platformer. And Ash vs. Evil Dead's getting the same thing. The titles are Retro Realms Halloween and Retro Realms Ash vs. Evil Dead. These two will be released on October 18th. They let players traverse the worlds and enter different realms to overcome challenges inspired by Halloween and Ash vs. Evil Dead, combining retro visuals with modern mechanics. Players venture between two overlapping worlds, so you can be in the Evil Dead universe with Michael Myers. You can be in the Halloween universe with Ash, with the ability to enter the nightmare-infested dark realm at any time, which unlocks shortcuts, hidden pathways, and rewards for those of us brave to enter. In Retro Realms Halloween, players take control of Michael Myers and other characters to slash through familiar settings and overcome the ultimate evil. And in Ash vs. Evil Dead, fans can play as Ash Williams to battle through iconic locations inspired by the Star series while fighting Deadites and other familiar characters from the show. And they're coming out on October 18th for PC, PS5, Switch, and Xbox. It's going to be purchased on the storefront for $24.99 each, or you can purchase a double feature bundle, which will retail for $49.99. So not a bad price. You kind of expect the lower price there when it's kind of the side scroller, old school style, but there's a screenshot of the Halloween portion of kind of what it's going to look like there for these 16-bit Retro Realms games. So that's the little bit of video game news we got here. Now let's talk movie and TV news. All right, and one of the first things to talk about here in movie news is we're getting, kind of a throwback to those old Universal horror movies with Creature from the Black Lagoon being remade by James Wan here. This coming from Variety. Aquaman director James Wan returning to the sea for his next feature film, developing a remake of Creature from the Black Lagoon in his early talks to direct for Universal. The project is described as a grounded, modernized retelling that leans into visceral horror whilst paying respect, I should say, to the original classic. It's been 70 years since The Creature from the Black Lagoon graced the big screen in 1954, directed by Jack Arnold, starring Richard Carlson and Julia Adams. Over the years, several directors, including Guillermo del Toro, has tried to reboot the black and white monster movie, but none have gotten off the ground. So maybe this is finally the time that it happens, is with James Wan here doing it for Universal. He's had some success with stuff he's produced and stuff that he's directed, obviously. So not a bad choice, I think. And we'll see if it ends up happening this time and we get to see Creature from the Black Lagoon, a remake from James Wan. All right, next up, a horror movie that I didn't even know was coming until I saw a trailer for it in the theaters a couple days ago. Never Let Go, the Halle Berry horror movie directed by Alexander Aja, who we all know, did Crawl, did the Hills Have Eyes remake back in the early 2000s. It's going to be releasing this September, actually, and it's moved up its release date here. Lionsgate is producing this, putting this out September 20th, moving up from September 27th. So Never Let Go, Halle Berry horror movie coming out September 20th. Never Let Go joins Paramount's Transformers 1 and Mubi's Demi Moore horror movie The Substance on September 20. So I think it has a good chance of winning out that weekend. I like the looks of this from the trailer. If you haven't had a chance to watch the trailer yet, go check it out. Seems like it's another kind of post-apocalyptic kind of thing where seems like monsters come out at night, kind of like the From TV show almost type shit. But definitely, Alexander Aja has done great when he's done horror. And so excited to see this one. Probably going to check this one out in September. Maybe you'll hear a review for it on a future episode of JC's Pop Culture. But Never Let Go coming out September 20th. And well, while we're talking about Alexander Aja, may as well talk about Crawl 2. I just mentioned that he directed the first one. He is returning to direct the sequel that is coming out. Didn't even realize this was coming out until I saw this article from Bloody Disgusting, which is where this is coming from. Released in 2019, Alexander Aja's Crawl put Kaya Scodelario up against the Category 5 hurricane and a pack of hungry alligators, which was an awesome, mix of action and horror, as they're saying there. Really cool to see, kind of a disaster movie meet a horror movie, like a Jaws type shit, but with an alligator. But you also got a hurricane that's, not allowing you to really leave the area either. So really, well-placed movie as far as situational horror, stuck in one place. And it ended up being a highly tense movie as well. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. Crawl scared up over 91 million worldwide on only a $13 million budget, with sequel talks beginning almost immediately. The latest on Crawl 2, The Hollywood Reporter reports that Paramount Pictures is deep in development on the sequel, with Aja returning to direct. Andrew Douchman, I don't think that's how you say it. It's probably Douchman. Anyways. Oh, shit, I made myself laugh with that one. And Jason Pagan, who wrote Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension, are the two writers. The Hollywood Reporter notes Crawl 2 will feature a new cast and a new location. In this case, the more urban dangers of New York City, according to sources. So seems like they're going to take it into, a city landscape now. So maybe there will still be some disaster going on. Maybe it's a tornado or something this time instead of a hurricane. Hope they keep some aspect of it. But interesting, it's got to have something, right? Because the alligators got to get there in the city somehow. So maybe a hurricane hits New York or wherever city they end up using. But we know Crawl 2 is coming, and Alexander Aja is directing, courtesy of this Bloody Disgusting article. Sticking on Bloody Disgusting again for this one. We knew the new Final Destination movie was coming. We talked about it on a previous episode here of JC's Pop Culture, but a lot of people were wondering, is it going to be a wide release? Is it going to be straight to streaming? Sounds like it is going to be a wide release. It will be a theatrical and even an IMAX release. The Final Destination franchise returning to life with the brand new 6th installment titled Final Destination Bloodlines. Franchise creator Jeffrey Riddick brings confirmation this week that the upcoming movie will not only be playing in theaters, but in IMAX as well. Zach Lebowski and Adam B. Stein are directing the fresh installment, which is scheduled to arrive in theaters next year. No release date yet at this time. The cast includes Theo Breens, Breck Basinger, Caitlin Santa-Wana, Richard Harmon, Anna Lore, Owen Patrick Joyner, Max Lloyd Jones, Rhea Kilstead, and Tenpo Lee. So theatrical and in IMAX confirmed by the creator there, as you see the tweet he put out referencing that, saying that it's not going to be a Max original, because I think that's what originally was the plan, was it going to Max. Now it's going theatrical and it's going to IMAX as well. So excited to see and learn more plot details about this one. Definitely be one that I'm checking out next year. Hopefully around this time it'll be released, ahead of, the fall season, and we'll get to see a Final Destination movie for the first time in a long time. And then the last piece of horror movie news I've got here, Thanksgiving director Eli Roth teases Addison Rae's return in the sequel, saying we kept her alive for a reason. So I'm just glad to hear some news on the Thanksgiving sequel. Thanksgiving, I think, was one of the more underrated movies that I really enjoyed, especially one of the more underrated horror movies. I really enjoyed this slasher, and I'm a sucker for slashers. You guys know that's by far my favorite type of horror movie. So glad to see a sequel in the works, Eli Roth back, and Addison Rae back. I thought she played a good role in the first one. Sounds like Addison Rae will be joining Eli Roth at the Thanksgiving table again. This is courtesy of Variety here. Shortly after the first Turkey Day themed horror movie was released, it was announced that a sequel was being developed. I'm glad to hear another piece of news on it, because I hadn't heard shit about it since then, though. Roth, the director and co-writer of the first and second films, tells me that he and co-writer Jeff Rendell are about to hand in the follow-up script to the studio. When asked if Rae would be returning, Roth smiled. I love Addison Rae. We kept her alive for a reason. Doesn't feel like a Thanksgiving movie without her. Even so, sources say that she has not signed a deal yet officially. So hopefully that will be maybe one of the next pieces of news that we get. Do we have any details on this one? Let's see. Here's the only thing we got, really. Roth confirmed that the sequel will also take place during Thanksgiving. When asked if he plans to expand the franchise into other holidays, Roth first said, let's get this sequel done first. So sounds like that may be in the works. Thanksgiving 2 set to open in 2025. But that's all we really have as far as plot details and the potential that it sounds like Addison Rae may be back for the sequel as well. But Eli Roth already turning in the script is good news. So it seems like it's, on par for being able to release when it's supposed to release. It's on course for that and shit. So super excited to get a sequel to Thanksgiving coming sometime next year. And the last piece of movie news here I want to talk about is a movie that I've been covering for a long time here on the channel on JC's Pop Culture, and that's Superman. James Gunn's Superman movie, the live action start to the DCU. Of course, we get Creature Commandos coming up later this year that kind of really kickstarts it, but that's animated. So this is the first live action piece of the DCU. Will be the Superman film that we've covered the filming of throughout on the channel. Just wrapped up principal photography not too long ago, and of course James Gunn was asked about reshoots, and in this Variety article they detailed that James Gunn is going to avoid reshoots because he doesn't film until he has a finished script, and he's done one day of reshoots on his past 2 films combined. So it seems like James Gunn had a really good plan for this, and seems like he won't need reshoots. They got everything that they needed done in principal photography here. James Gunn wrapped filming on Superman at the end of July. Still plenty of work to be done, all in post, though, it sounds like. Responding to fans on threads, the writer said he's not nearly finished with the movie. Once you're done shooting, you've only just begun. Of course, post-production really takes kind of the most time, especially with these superhero films, these comic book movies. Still lots of editing, VX, sound, and scoring to be done. When one follower suggested there will be reshoots, which have become a staple in big Hollywood tentpoles, Gunn replied, I don't know. I've done a total of 1 day of reshoots on my past 2 films combined. Considering Gunn's last 2 movies were comic book tentpoles, Guardians and The Suicide Squad, it's mighty impressive that he didn't need a bulk of reshoots to get either film competing. And then, of course, when he was asked about that, he said he over prepares. He doesn't start shooting until he has his script finished and the whole team is happy with it. He hires actors and department heads who knows how they can do their jobs. He surrounds himself with people who will challenge him and not just yes, sir, everything. And he asks himself daily, are there any small imperfections in the script or what we're shooting that we might feel like huge imperfections when we cut the film together? And then he says, go back to number 1 and 2 again, which is over prepare. Elaborating on this third tip, Gunn wrote that there's usually a lengthy audition process on his films to find the right actor. He also does background checks, talking to people they've worked with before. Of course, when it came to casting Superman, Gunn found his Man of Steel in David Cornsweet, who we just recently saw in Twisters and Pearl. Joining Cornsweet are Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, Skylar Gisondo as Jimmy Olsen. We went over the cast ad nauseum here. You guys know this shit if you've been following the channel. And, of course, we know the release date, July 11th, 2025, a day I'm counting down to. Can't wait to get to see this James Gunn Superman film and can't wait to see his DCU start. I think he's got a great vision and a great plan, and I think it's going to be a really exciting time to be a fan of DC and a fan of Superman. As you guys know, my favorite character, so can't wait to get this one, July 11th, 2025. Can't get here soon enough. And James Gunn working hard in post-production now, and it sounds like avoiding reshoots as well. And that wraps us up here for movie news on episode 10 of JC's Pop Culture Pod. So there we got it, guys. 5 spoiler reviews for 5 things that I've watched recently here. It's 2024 releases. I really enjoyed most of them. I thought they were all pretty much above average movies, as you could tell by my ratings there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed listening to me, rant about them, review them and stuff, and probably talk too much about them, but nonetheless, hopefully you enjoyed it. If you're here on YouTube, drop your thoughts on any of those movies in the comments or anything you got there in general. And of course, if you're listening on the audio side, leave us a rating. That really helps a lot on any podcast platform you like. You can find us Apple, Amazon, Spotify, all that shit, whatever other ones there are, we're probably on there here at JC's Pop Culture Podcast. So, if you like the audio only version, you can do that. If you like the video going along with it, we're here on YouTube as well. If you're on the audio only side, be sure to hop over here to the YouTube channel and subscribe though, because I'm putting out, other videos, mainly covering the EA Sports College Football video game, but also, covering that Superman movie, covering James Gunn's DCU. So if any of that's up your alley, be sure to subscribe here to the channel. And if you are here on YouTube watching this, just hit the like button before you head out. That little thumbs up helps a shit ton with that YouTube algorithm. Here in the future, we'll be talking some more movie news, and I'll be reviewing some more shit. Definitely, like I said, coming up, we got Alien Romulus. What else do we got coming? Craven the Hunter is at this month. It's at some point this year. I think, let me see if I can flip this calendar. Next month, we got Beetlejuice. So definitely got some reviews coming in the near future for sure that we're super excited about. I'll be reviewing those. And of course, there's some other stuff I want to go back and watch stuff. I got a chance to watch In a Violent Nature. So those are just some reviews you can probably expect maybe on the next episode of JC's Pop Culture Podcast, which will be coming pretty soon. But in the meantime, in between time, hope you guys enjoyed episode 10 here, some of these reviews, some of this news and shit that we've talked about throughout this episode. As always, I appreciate you tuning into this one, and I will catch you on the next one.